This is John with Just Money Motorsports. This morning we're going to do a clutch service tech talk on this new RZR Turbo S. We're going to remove the clutch cover, clean the clutches, talk about clutch service. We're also going to talk about driving techniques, four-wheel drive versus two-wheel drive, high range versus low range, and good practice to save your belt and maintenance. Today we are going to do tech talk on this RZR Turbo. Any of you guys that are Can-Am owners, the stuff we're talking about is essentially the same, a little different in design and looks, but the functionality is the same. So even if you don't own a Polaris, information still applies. One of our things when we service RZRs here, going through the chassis and cleaning the clutches and doing some maintenance type items are, in my opinion, more important than the oil change. You got synthetic oil, 50 hours on synthetic oil is not that big of a deal. So going through cleaning these clutches, torquing chassis bolts, and just checking out the whole car is most important. We're going to focus today on the clutches and how to not destroy a $200 belt. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to pull this clutch cover off. Most of you guys, one, by watching this, two, if you own an X3 or a RZR or a model that's easy to get to the clutch cover, this is good practice to do at home. You know, if you tinker around at home and want to play around pulling the clutch cover, that way if you blow a belt on the trail, you know what you're up against. You don't want to be trying to learn on the trail while everyone's waiting for you to keep going. Your toolkits that come with your machines generally come with enough tools to do a belt change. They're very generic and pain in the ass to use, but it is possible. Any of your clutch covers are going to have an O-ring in the groove. Always make sure that's there, not torn, not falling out. It's more important on reassembly that it's not hanging out and getting pinched. First thing we're doing is check this guy's belt out. I'll pull it off, pass it around. You guys take a look at it, see if there's any damage. Every model is going to work a little bit differently. The idea is compressing that secondary to release the belt tension so I can remove it. The RZR Turbos require a threaded bolt that goes in there, which there is one in his toolkit. It's a little T-handle threaded deal that would work. RZR 1000s generally just require a little bar or something that wedges between a channel and the clutch, and you pry it open that way. And then the Can-Ams require a threaded bolt like that as well. So his belt's not too bad. The key to maintaining your belt is using low range at low speed. So anytime you're under, and again it varies per machine, but let's just say 20 miles an hour. Anytime you're under 20 miles an hour, you should be in low range. Anytime you're gonna go over an obstacle of any sort, you should be in low range. It essentially works like bicycle gears. You got the small diameter in the front, large diameter in the back. As you accelerate, that front clutch is going to compress, that rear clutch is going to open, the diameter is going to change. You can go to a larger diameter in the front, smaller diameter in the back. Again, just like bicycle gears. You know what? Higher, as those diameters change, you're going faster, more load on the engine. Those clutches work best in a 1-to-1 ratio, meaning same diameter in the front as the back. So when you're driving around at 5 miles an hour in high range, that belt is running around the small diameter in the front, large diameter in the back. You're creating belt heat and it's slipping. And so by running a low range, it's in that 1-to-1 ratio. And then the same thing would apply on the opposite end of the of the range there is if you're in low range running at your max speed, now that belt is at the largest diameter in the front, smallest diameter in the back. So now you're back to inefficient. So 1-to-1 is best. So whatever your top speed is in a low range, like this particular machine will do 45 miles an hour in low range. So at 20, it's its prime efficiency, gear ratio. High range is capable of over 80, so in high range, 40 miles an hour is most efficient. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to rev it up in park or neutral. When you're in park or neutral, both clutches will spin. So as I rev it up in park or neutral, you're going to see how that ratio changes. The clutches are going to open and close. So you see how the RPMs increase, that belt goes down in that rear clutch, up in that front clutch. The next thing is, that was obviously in park, so both clutches are spinning free. The next thing is, when you're in gear, the belt's only going to turn when the tires turn. When you apply throttle, that front clutch is spinning engine RPM. The belt doesn't turn until the tires turn. So as soon as you apply power and that clutch grabs that belt and you don't get the tires rolling, that clutch is spinning against that belt and it's actually wearing a notch in it. Similar to doing a burnout with your tires. That clutch is spinning against it and it's not going anywhere. So I'm going to demonstrate that right now, and then we have plenty of examples to show what you can do to the belt. So I'm in gear. As soon as I rev it up, you'll see that front clutch grab that belt. Like that. So I'm applying torque to that belt, but I'm holding the brake, and the tires aren't moving. So, let's say you're sitting at a stoplight, and you're just revving the engine up, but you're not really going anywhere. Kind of like this, right? I'm not holding the brake, I'm just hitting the throttle. I'm damaging that belt because that clutch is grabbing the belt, and it's not moving. It's sitting there slipping on it. So right now I'm in high range, and you can see how slow that back clutch is turning, how I'm slipping it. Now I'm in a low range. It wants to go right away without slipping. This is kind of worst case scenario. An example would be, had a customer try to load his RZR on his trailer in high range. So you're going up the ramps, you're under a load, he's in high gear, so that clutch is slipping like crazy. He gets kind of hung up on his ramp with a tire, and he applies throttle. The machine doesn't move. He applies more throttle. The machine still doesn't move. Pretty soon he gives it enough gas, and that belt gets hot enough that it takes off and jumps over the ramp. Had he been in low range, he would have enough torque to the wheels to drive right over it without causing damage. This is what happened to the belt. You can clearly see is the diameter of that front clutch as you're taking off. Is that section right there that's damaged. That front clutch actually opens up, so it's not actually touching this belt. It's got some distance there. So when you're at an idle in gear, it's not hurting anything. As soon as you apply throttle, that clutch will close, grab this belt, that's when you feel that clunk, and now it's engaged on the belt, and at that point you need to either get the car rolling or let off the throttle. You want to avoid that transition as much as possible. If the engine's at an idle, that clutch is disengaged from the belt, and it's fine. It's only when you apply the throttle.
Can you be in a drive gear, high or low, and you're just stopped? Is that tough on your belt or clutches then?
No, because they do have a bearing in the center, and those shivs have, at an idle, they've separated from this belt. They've opened up, so it's not hurting it at that point. The only time it hurts it is when you apply the throttle. As soon as you apply that throttle, that clutch is going to compress and grab and engage against the belt. So if you're in gear at an idle, doesn't necessarily hurt it.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
as long as you're at an idle.
I always thought it'd be good to put it in neutral or park.
And it is. And there's another reason for that. Dave, you want to pass this one around? This is a much less example, but you can see between the yellow marks where this belt has been slipped. This is our most common. That's what most of them look like when they've been damaged. The reason it is beneficial to put it in park or neutral is park or neutral, both clutches will spin. Because now that it's freed up that transmission and both clutches will spin, which will allow airflow. Those clutches will cool while they're spinning as they draw in air. So if you're sitting there idling in gear, not necessarily hurting the belt, but you're also not getting, it's also not spinning to cool down. So it is best to put it in park or neutral when you stop. Question might be, okay, well, so there's a notch in it, what's wrong with that belt? Two things. One, the engine detects misfire off of crank speed. So when you have a belt with a notch in it like that and you're driving slow, every time that belt goes around that clutch and that engine kind of ratchets because it's got that notch in that belt, it can set a misfire code with check engine light. We get customers all the time, oh, I set a belt code. Well, there's no such thing as a belt code, it's an engine misfire. Most commonly, engine misfire is caused from a bad belt, but it could be other things as well. So, secondly, if you were to go down a fast fire road, gravel road, sand dunes, start running somewhere where you're getting a lot of belt heat, that belt is going to blow, it's going to break at that spot where it's notched. It's got a hard spot in it, and that's where it's going to break. Our average speed, let's say our club rides or our medium speed rides, but if you're running hard, like sand dunes or 50 plus miles an hour for a long time, that belt's going to get hot. If you stop and shut the engine off, the belt's not cooling down. At that point, it's actually heat soaking because it's attached to the motor, it's in a black housing. You shut it off, there's no airflow to it, it's actually getting hotter. So if you're running under a hard load, it's best to stop, put it in park, and apply some engine arm and rev it up. Because that's going to let that belt spin, it's going to draw airflow into them clutches, and it's going to give it a good chance to cool down. I'd say let it idle for a minute, rev it up a few times, let it idle for a minute, and then shut it down. I run four-wheel drive 100% of the time when I'm in the dirt. Doesn't matter why, how, what, when, it's in four-wheel drive. It adds less wear to everything. When you're in two-wheel drive, then back tires are trying to push the rest of the car, and every little bump they hit, they're ratcheting, right? Every bump, every washboard they come over, they're ratcheting. So you're constantly spike loading them rear axles. When you're in four-wheel drive, the front end's pulling the car through the bumps. So whatever amount of torque you put into the ground, in four-wheel drive you're dividing that by 4, in two-wheel drive you're putting it all to the rear axles. So it's easier on the axles, it's easier on the drivetrain, it's easier on the trails. A lot of the trails that washboard is caused from them tires ratcheting. If everyone's running four-wheel drive and had less wheel spin, they're not going to be creating them bumps. And then the trails get rutted out. Every little wash and hill you come to, every ride I go on, I see somebody running two-wheel drive, and they go up a hill, and they can't make it, and they've dug 2 big old trenches and holes, and then they stop and try to put it in four-wheel drive. But now you're damaging the belt, because now you've already got the back tires dug in, you're already on an incline, now you can try to engage that four-wheel drive and pull out of it. Another thing is cornering. We get a lot of wreck racers in here, and if you're coming around a corner and you're in four-wheel drive, you can counter steer, apply throttle, and pull out of it. If you come around a corner, there's so many scenarios. Let's say you're on a trail and there's the berm there, and your back tire gets over that berm, so it wants to wash you out. When you're in two-wheel drive, you have no control. You apply throttle, you're going to keep spinning. You let off the throttle, you're probably going to keep spinning. Once it catches, you're going to tip. When you're in four-wheel drive, you can apply the throttle and pull the car straight. Yeah, we run four-wheel drive all the time.